take a look, Pete, at your Vikings, because we have somebody that was offering a little rant here that you might be hearing from Pete on Sunday on his Sports Huddle, WCCO Odyssey app, by the way.
Yep.
Let's take a listen, Pete, and see if indeed he thinks the Vikings are cursed.
I'll be the one to say it, but I'm afraid this Minnesota Vikings season is cursed. It's only July 24th, but the series of unfortunate events that the Minnesota Vikings have already suffered is stuff you can't make up.
He's right. He's right.
Second-year cornerback Mekhi Blackman, who was looking to be a promising piece on this defense, unfortunately tore his ACL today at training camp. This comes after the tragic passing of Kyrie Jackson, and this Vikings cornerback room just got a lot thinner. Not to mention, Jordan Addison will probably be facing a suspension to start the season. And if it's not the start of this season, it's probably the start of next season due to the DUI allegations. I'm usually pretty optimistic about Viking seasons, but honestly, I just want to get through this one with no more injuries, no more off-the-field issues. I just want everyone to stay healthy. Be ready for 2025 when the Vikings are going to make a serious move at winning.
He's given up on this year.
Yeah, well, they might be able to find some corners to step in there, Pete. They might have to trade. What do you think?
Yeah, well, they've done a good job over the years. Well, not too good of a job, because that's been an area where we've drafted and we've got corners that are okay, maybe at best. We really have had a difficult time, but we have drafted quite a few over the years in the secondary. Safeties that were first-round picks that have been hurt, all of that. So I think he's completely correct about all of that, John. I mean, the saga of this whole thing lingers. You've got Kirk Cousins. That's kind of what kicked it all off last year, as he yanked off of his Achilles, and now he's gone. He's in Atlanta. You've got J.J. McCarthy, which is great. Obviously, that's an outstanding thing to have J.J. McCarthy on board. But Jordan Addison getting, his second time basically having a DUI, that's a bit of a problem, I'd say. Kyrie Jackson, unfortunately, had that incredible incident on the highway with the racing and the this and the that, losing his life. That's not a good thing. That guy was a 6'4", 200-pound cornerback, John. You don't find guys like that very often, and unfortunately, he is not a part of the Vikings team. And then, of course, Mekhi Blackman gets out there and ACL in day one. They're doing 7-on-7 in day one, and the guy tears his ACL. I mean, you can't really find too much worse as far as having a curse than that. That all being said, here's the way I view it. The Chicago Bears are loaded. You and I talked about that the other day. We were talking about they've got great receivers. I really like the running back, and obviously you went out, found a great quarterback and a receiver, the whole thing. Green Bay Packers are kind of the same thing. Great draft. They've actually got Jordan Love, seems to be a guy who's in position to be a really top-end quarterback. We'll see how that plays out. They've got Josh Jacobs, the running back from the Raiders, who I think is one of the best running backs in football. Detroit Lions, what else can you say? These guys are loaded. Where do the Vikings stack up, John, in the NFC North? When you look at that, makes me start thinking that the Vikings might be at the very bottom of that whole deal. What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, Pete, it's not like you can't pick up a D2 or even a D1 corner that had a decent career, but nobody has a ton of them. So you're not probably trading for a guy. You're instead having to develop a kid. And I'll be surprised if this doesn't hurt the Vikings, because you and I would both say their Achilles heel has been for years their defense.
Yep.
They can score, but they can't stop people from scoring. And now if you have basically three corners out, that's pretty tough. We'll see whether or not Jordan Love makes that push against the Detroit Lions, and or whether Caleb Williams comes up and does what many of us hope and think that he might do for the Chicago Bears. So, I don't think it's a stretch to say the Vikings might be the bottom of this division.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And I love JJ. I think he's going to be an awesome quarterback for the Vikings. But, like you said, it's really been more about the defense. And is the defense a defense as they lose a couple of different players? How well can they defend against a really good offensive? When you look at the Detroit Lions, pretty damn good with Goff. You can look at Jordan Love, looks pretty damn good. Caleb Williams, we think he's going to be pretty damn good. So they might be ripping up the Vikings on defense, throwing the ball around, and that could be a problem. How about this next one, John? The Mets and the Yankees. Now, I think early in the season, many of us, I'm included, you just basically looked at the Mets. They were struggling. You go, you know what? I don't see it. I don't see how the Mets are going to do anything. They got this high payroll, and yet it's not paying off. Well, it's starting to pay off just a little bit, John, and they are taking on the Yankees in a big way. As a matter of fact, they beat the Yankees 12-3. They had 5 home runs the other day. They've been outscoring a lot of these teams in obscene numbers of late. They've got their bats really going for the Mets. It's been pretty good. They've won 7 of the last 10. And meanwhile, you look over at the Yankees. There's nothing wrong with their record. When you look at just the record, you say, well, they got 60 wins, Pete. What's wrong with that? I would just say, all right, but they lost 3 to Cincinnati. They lost 2 of 3 to Tampa. They did beat Baltimore 2 of 3. They split with Tampa the next time. They've lost 2 now to the Mets. That doesn't sound like a team that's really on fire, does it? It sounds like a team to me that's kind of playing sort of 500 baseball, maybe. But they're just not getting it done the way they were dominant in the first part of the season, for sure. The Yankees looked absolutely unbelievable, unbeatable. But they're starting to look a little bit beatable. So what do you think about this whole New York? Are we going to have a Subway Series, do you think, or not?
Well, the Mets sweeping them this past weekend, Pete, is something that I think some people are reading into that the Mets are that much better than the Yankees. The Yankees could still make a trade here, Pete, and get in position. Like you say, 60 wins doesn't exactly imply, just after the All-Star break, doesn't imply that you're imploding. But to lose to your crosstown rival, and then I'll have to tweet out a video, Pete, of some Mets fans and Yankees fans getting into a big brawl.
Shocker.
Always classic when the fans get into a brawl over a baseball game. But they did, and there's a lot of name calling and all the rest. But I think overall, both teams are good to great, and it just depends on, who gets the hot pitching and the hot hitting, Pete.
Yep.
Because that's the way it works in baseball, and neither one of these guys are out of this.
No, it's good. And they got the big payrolls, but you and I have been talking about this all year. It's amazing how payrolls don't mean it all happens, but it's starting to show up a little bit better each and every. I mean, the Dodgers look pretty damn good. They got a pretty big payroll. The Yankees, pretty damn good. They got a big payroll. The Mets starting to look good with the big payroll. You still got teams out there like Baltimore, Cleveland, and some of these where they're a fraction of the same sort of money that they're putting out there, and yet they're playing pretty damn good. So it's a fun year, I think, for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting into the playoffs here, especially given those, like you say, monumental $200+ million payrolls that the Mets and Yankees both have, along with the Dodgers.